Hello, YouTube, and hello, Yusef, my friend. um, you first of all, just you mentioned doing Google Hangout. I'm absolutely down to do this. The only reason why we haven't done it, uh, I Theo and Mike Norman haven't been around to do a hangout. Kind of. I wouldn't be opposed to doing one just you and I. My work schedule is kind of funky though, so but all of that aside. Um, so you talk about this idea of laying the axe at the root, right? And and that's a really uh, fascinating gesture for me because I've actually argued this before, um, but I think you're right. I think that the creationist and the scientist are going to be talking past each other inevitably. They're going to be banging their heads against one another, and won't it's a fruitless conversation. Things can come out of it though that are interesting, right? Like science education can come out of it. I think again the why do people laugh at creationists videos are like wonderful from the perspective of sort of science education. Um, but it isn't effective in terms of actually getting through to the creationist. I think that's obviously true. And you talk about laying the axe at the root, and what how I read what you're saying is, and I think it's right, is to just point out that um, you, your Christianity is unchristian, um, maybe flirting with the heretical even. Your you could say something like you, Zizek makes this point, and it's a beautiful point. He actually makes it about Gnostics, but I'd make it about contemporary sort of Protestant fundamentalism also. That they're Christians who don't get the joke of Christianity, right? And I think that's true. I think that there's something, and Bill Hicks has this line. Fundamentalists. There's no irony, right? They take the word literally, right? So it excludes um, everything poetic about Christianity. It excludes that which I think is interesting about Christianity, and also it's an ideological um, uh, nexus, right? Like you have put scripture into a certain space um, of sort of un- ineffability, unchallengeability, um, which once you start saying like, well, here's the history behind where it arose. Here are the material conditions that sort of fed into the creation of these books, right? Here are the various limitations that these people had. Here are the various, these are people. You see again. This is why I think Paul is so interesting. You really see him struggling to think through these things. He's not just stating, God told me this, and that's just something that's a propositional truth, right? He's really trying to like come to grips with um, his uh, um, this devastating event that happened to him. Um, but so yeah, no, when you start pointing out all the material features of Scripture, I think that is a much more effective way to deal with creationism, right? Again, essentially just stating like you this is unchristian, um, and one step further to say, uh, um, your reading of the Old Testament is un-Jewish at that, right? Like you can play this game further back. Um, uh, you know, the Jewish people have a reading of the old, or have developed over thousands of years, certain tools and techniques for dealing with the Old Testament that Protestantism just like sweeps aside, and I don't think that you can do that. That doesn't make sense. And I think that that is also true about that's also true about even the New Testament, right? Um, John Shelby Spong, who I've mentioned to you before in an exchange, he talks about reading the Bible through Jewish eyes, right? So the slaughter of the innocents that Herod carries out. The whole point of that is that it mirrors um, uh, Moses, right? So what you're saying here is that Jesus is just as awesome as Moses, right? And then you have also Jesus ascending into heaven, which is just like Ezekiel, right? With the Merkaba and all of that stuff. So you have this you know it's look how awesome Jesus is. He doesn't even need this device to go into heaven. He can just fly there, right? So you have all this poetic language, and even the notion of God sacrificing or sending Jesus to be sacrificed is an echo of Abraham and Isaac, right? So he's just as awesome as just as worthy as Isaac, even more so, right? Even more so than Abraham. So we tend to not look at these stories with that through the we don't look at them in the way that a first century Jew or you know later I don't I'm hesitant to use the word Christian for first century, but there's a sort of transition period. We could say Jew/Christian. What a first century person from that tradition would see, right? We don't take that into account when we look at this, and this is especially true of someone like Venom Fang X. It doesn't process, right? But I would go even further than when you say to lay the axe at the root, right? Um, it's almost like if you take Protestantism, or what we're referring to here as Protestantism. I know that it's actually a much richer tradition than we're necessarily giving it credit for in this discourse. But if you take that central, or if you take like creationism essentially, and you can lay the axe at the root, and like you say, and show that it's not Christian, right? It doesn't work. It's a new thing, and it comes from a misunderstanding of what Scripture is and what it's supposed to be, right? And so that pushes out um, it pushes things out, right? So again, to go back to Zizek, he has this notion that like in order for ideology to function, a little bit has to remain in shadow, right? You can't have everything on the table in order for things to function ideologically. You have to have something that you don't follow all the way out to its conclusion. So I think it's very possible to take Christian fundamentalism and to follow the logic of Christianity out and show that it doesn't work internally, right? There's a sort of dialectical move here, right? You can show that it fails on its own logic, and so you end up with this much larger form of Christianity. And I would go further though, personally. I think, and this might be why I consider myself an atheist in a certain way, is that I think that if you take that bigger sphere, there's still a certain amount left in shadow. That if you follow out further, you end up in something like atheism. I don't think that this isn't a new observation, right? Jean-Luc Nancy, again, looking at Christianity as a self-deconstructing system, a system that he claims it's the religion that points the way out of religion. And I sort of agree with this. I think if you follow the logic of Christianity out to its end, you you end up with something like atheism. And I was going to do a video on presuppositionalism today, to illustrate kind of exactly this point, but I'm not. I don't know. I may or may not do it. We'll see. So I agree. I'll put it this way. It has to be, the critique has to be internal internal to the tradition that it is criticizing. Right? It can't come from the outside and just try to smash it to pieces. Right? It has to come apart from within, or at least that's the most persuasive way such a thing can be achieved. I think that's not totally true. I'm sure that there are people who are creationists who you can show them science, and they break out of that. But I don't think that that's sufficient enough to lead to atheism, first of all, and I actually don't think that it's for the reasons that you outline. I don't think it's persuasive to the Christian. I don't think that an atheism that's built solely is the key word, an atheism that's built solely on empiricism is terribly convincing. To me personally, it's not sufficient, right? Um, and I might get some flack for that statement. Um, but yeah, no, I agree. And again, I'd love to do a hangout. Just let me know some time that you're free, and we'll figure that out. Always a pleasure, Yusef, and have a good day.